You're not going to get cardiology because if you have the longer wait times at the VA, a lot of veterans are going there because 5 months, 6 months, I talk to staff all the time. So all you're going to do is make veterans wait 5, 6, 7, 8 months, not get the care. Stage 1 cancer becomes stage 4 cancer, heart attacks. And then I have staff where business directors are literally saying, our goal is zero community care. The Undersecretary of Health did a video last March, a virtual town hall saying, you will cut community care, and you're going to, and community care is going to be the very last option. And so it's very Orwellian. We've seen the documents, we've seen how they do this. And even though the law says that you are eligible, even though the veteran says they want it, they literally put together these teams that know nothing about the veterans, the medical workers, and overturn their own doctors, overturn the law, overturn the regulation, and deny veterans community care.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. You know, the most famous physical address in America is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it's not just a place where presidents and their families live, but where people go to work every day. And the decisions made at the White House can have a positive or a negative effect on America. During the Trump administration, one of the focuses was getting veterans access to health care quicker and closer than the Veterans Affairs facilities could offer. The problem was some veterans were having to drive 5 or more hours for an appointment or wait months to see someone, which for some veterans could mean the difference between life and death. A bill called the Mission Act was passed to help with these issues, and we've done several episodes about this over the past year, from talking with veterans who've benefited from using the Mission Act to people from Concerned Veterans for America about the work they did to get it passed. Today, we get to talk to the man who helped write the Mission Act. I want to welcome United States Air Force veteran Darin Selnick, who is also a senior advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. Darin, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Jeff. Love being on. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, so I've worked for Americans for Prosperity for many years now. I've heard your name so many times, and the incredible effort that you put forth to get the Mission Act passed. So it's just great to have you be on the show. Let's talk about your service, though. First, you served in the Air Force. Talk about maybe why you decided to join the Air Force.
Well, some people say it's because I'm a contrarian, but serving in the military was not very popular in the late 70s and early 80s. But the reason I really join the Air Force was I wanted to fly, I wanted to fight, and I wanted to serve my country. And so I volunteered and went through basic training, ROTC, all that good stuff, and then got commissioned in 84 and went on active duty in 85.
Wow. Got to serve all over the world, I would assume?
Yeah, TDYs and stuff like that. I'm mainly stationed in the United States, but went to Paris, France on a TDY and did not get a great reception. Went to Tokyo and Japan. So yeah, you see a lot of different cultures, a lot of different things. Unfortunately, when you are overseas, when you're off the base, they tell you dress in civilian clothes that do not let people know that you're an American. Be nondescript, those sorts of things. And then if you get in trouble, hightail it back to the base as fast as you can. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of like the standing orders, and they still are strong today because you just never know what's going to happen to you.
Sure. So after your military career, you ended up serving in a bunch of different advisory roles. What were those roles, and what did you get to work on through those roles?
Well, I got a chance to work in the private sector in healthcare. And then in 2001, Secretary Principi, who I knew here in Southern California, asked me to come to the VA to help fix up the VA in 2001. So I served him. I served as special assistant to 3 secretaries in the Bush administration, and then senior advisor to 2 secretaries in the Trump administration, and did a stint in the White House as the Veterans Affairs advisor for the president at the Domestic Policy Council.
So, I mean, you really had a perfect background, I guess, coming in during the Trump administration, and when the Mission Act became something that was a possibility. You had a lot of healthcare and military related experience coming into that, right?
Absolutely. I also was Speaker Boehner's appointee to the Commission on Care in 2015, 2016, which was a one-year endeavor how to fix the VA healthcare system. So I had a lot of background, but I had a lot of good contacts and a lot of expertise, Toby Cosgrove, Cleveland Clinic, et cetera, and some really good recommendations from the report that was like, hey, let's get this thing implemented. Lots of good implementations from the bipartisan panel. And we also had from CVA a big study we had done, the Executive Task Force report on how to fix the VA healthcare system with Undersecretary Cussman and other outstanding leaders and whatnot. So we had a lot of good information of what to do. So now it was, let's drive it home. Let's get it done.
So after you got out of the military, though, you also kind of got involved with some nonprofits that helped veterans. Why was that important for you to do, and what were some of those nonprofits that you were serving with?
Well, at first I had gotten involved with the typical veterans organizations. I was a senior person in the Jewish War Veterans, State Commander, National Executive Committee, American Legion, AMVETS. Eventually formed a foundation to help the veterans in the veterans home. But then along came CVA, which was formed in 2012, and I was recruited to be on the original organizing committee as a volunteer. And I realized that what CVA could do is fill a niche that no one was doing. The veterans organizations in their heyday used to do good policy, but that had fallen away. They used to do good Americanism and activism. That had kind of fallen away. They were just kind of like into processing claims, and nothing wrong with being a service organization and doing that, but there was nobody there to really advance what was going to be good policy and how to actually fix things rather than just ask for things. And that's where Concerned Veterans for America came in. It was kind of like the full service, create the policy, but also have the grassroots and be part of a larger, which is now Stand Together, organization, AFP, et cetera, of organizations that could unite and jointly do something about it. Create not just the policy, but help create the legislation, help do the oversight, and have the grassroots to drive home. So kind of a full circle. And so nobody else was doing that. It was unique. And that's what really got me interested, because I had seen, being in the Bush administration, about policy. I'd actually shepherded legislation, homeless legislation through, but the ability to create the good, not asking for us, but what was good for veterans, what was good for the government, what was good for the common citizen, what was good for everyone, and have a vehicle to take this from soup to nuts, which is what happened eventually with the Choice Act of 2014, accountability, and then the Mission Act. This unique. It's unique, and it's one of the things that why legislators and staff listen to us now at CVA is because we don't go there asking for a handout. We go with a hand to help them do what's right for veterans, and that is unique.
Yeah, well, it truly is. And I think, for Concerned Veterans for America and some of the great work that they do, we've talked about that. But this whole issue of the Mission Act and veterans care really fits right in with what Americans for Prosperity stands for, what Concerned Veterans for America stands for, but also what this podcast is about. We talk about eliminating barriers, government-imposed barriers that exist. And that's truly what has happened, and what has been really one of the main problems with healthcare at the VA is it's a government-imposed barrier to veterans getting their healthcare. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, what started off as an accident of history after World War I and World War II, where there just wasn't any national hospitals, and huge numbers of veterans, were broken and had PTSD. And so they had to set up the VA healthcare system because there wasn't a private system. That, unfortunately, by the Obama administration, had turned into socialized healthcare. And so I always say to people, and I say to staff, I say, what American would accept that the government would tell you, here's your doctor, here's your hospital, we're going to control every aspect of your healthcare. And if you don't like it, you don't get healthcare. Could you imagine Medicare telling that to senior citizens from now on? You don't have a choice. We're going to pick your hospital. We're going to pick your doctor, and you don't get Social Security. No one would accept it. But for some reason, it seemed to be okay. So the idea with the Mission Act, which a lot of it came from the Commission on Care, recommendation number 1, which said veterans should have the choice. There is no healthcare which does this, which is successful. So trying to normalize it with the regular healthcare system in the country, it said, hey, you should have one overall healthcare system, one overall network. And if you want to pick the VA, great. If you want to pick the community provider, great. You pick whatever works best for you. Primary care, specialty care, go through the normal healthcare process in terms of referral authorizations, but really just normalize it. That was actually signed off by the Obama administration. To this day, I'm not sure they knew what they were signing off, but it was bipartisan. It was unanimous. And unfortunately, it hadn't been implemented. So the Mission Act was to go halfway there, to basically follow TRICARE Prime when you have the access standards and the absolute choice if the organization can't meet the access standards. And that was a real permanent choice. And it worked really well at first. The second phase was going to be, and we do have the legislation that we worked with Senator Blackburn on, which is the full choice legislation. It is the Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act that would actually take it all the way there. But there's a great resistance because there is Eisenhower worried about a military complex. Well, there is a veterans complex of providers and contractors and whatnot that like things the way it are, rather than veterans having the choice. And the VA continually fights under this administration to go back to the Obama way of doing things. And so who's suffering are veterans who are not being seen, who are having long wait times. I just did a spot on Phoenix TV just last Friday because there was a veteran who got seen at the Phoenix hospital, had his appointment, walked out the doors, literally collapsed from a heart attack, was 3 feet away from the doors, and the Phoenix hospital wouldn't help him because he was outside the facility.
Gosh.
And so they for 11 minutes, they called the fire department, who came, took him to a community hospital where he later died.
Oh, tragic.
That is the bureaucracy of socialized healthcare.
Yeah. Yet you talk about all of this, but there are still politicians who use the VA system as kind of an example for why we should go to some government-run healthcare system or public option. It just amazes me that there are still people out there who don't understand the value of choice and what choice does, whether it's in education or healthcare or any other sector of our economy. Are there still people who believe that in government?
Oh, absolutely. They have written about it. Now, none of those people have to do that choice, not choice.
Right.
They don't have to live under that system. If
Sure.
they had to live under the system, then they wouldn't be so fond of it. But yeah, it's all ideological. They've written articles about how the VA, if we can make sure that socialized healthcare works, you can find these articles on the internet. Bernie Sanders is a big proponent of this, and others. But they feel that if you can just prove it out in the VA, you can do it to the rest of the country. The problem is they can't prove it out in the VA because it never works. The more they do it, the worse things get because socialized healthcare doesn't work. So it doesn't work. Veterans continue to flee the system. That's why they're complaining about it. And they've done a red team report, but it doesn't work. And so when it doesn't work, they say, well, we just need more money. We just need new staff because they just aren't doing it right. So no matter how much money they get on who else they hire, it just makes it worse.
Yeah. Well, and it isn't much like education. It isn't about the money. It's about where you're putting the emphasis on who gets to decide on that healthcare. Is it veterans or is it some bureaucrat somewhere? Let's talk about your time serving in the White House. You were able to work in the Trump White House. Talk about what it's like to work at the White House. Not very few people, very few percent of the American people ever get that opportunity. So talk about that, what it's like to work at the White House, and then talk about your work on the Mission Act.
Well, it's a very unique thing. I actually didn't want to go to the White House. You hear about all these people that want to go to the White House. It's so prestigious. It is prestigious, but I was like, do I really want to put myself in that situation? But they convinced me to come over with all the work, DPC director Andrew Brimberg. And I came over there. Then it wasn't as bad as I was imagining it. But it is a 24/7 job. Mm-hmm. So the downside is it's a 24/7 job. I mean, literally, you have your phone with you 24/7. You have your laptop. There is no such thing as vacation. You are tethered. You never know when the chief of staff or someone will want something or need something. I was in charge of everything veteran. So whether it was a Mission Act or Laura Trump's Pet for Vets, anything that was veteran related, I did. But what you find out is if you understand how to use the levers in the White House in your position as a Veterans Affairs advisor, and you have a president that actually wants to do something with veterans, you have great ability to get things done. I had a great boss who let me do what I needed to do. I had a lot of relationships on the Hill, and I had a lot of relationships in the White House. So I was able to advance and improve the Mission Act. And when bureaucracy got in the way, I was able to say, no, nothing's going to happen until you clear up the bureaucracy. And that sort of thing. So I'll give you a quick example. Before it was called the Mission Act, they wanted to move it over to Congress. And I wanted to put in some things like the Air Commission, the Center for Innovation, so we can consistently improve like CMMS does. And they didn't put it in. And they said, well, Congress wants this. Darren, we need you to sign off. DPC needs to sign off so we can send it over to Congress. And I said, no, we promised we would get this stuff in to have a complete bill. And they said, well, we'll put it in later. And I said, no, I know that trick. You'll never put it in if I let it go now. And I said, we will not move it to Congress. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they do. You're not going to have White House approval for this until you put in what you promised, OMB and VA. And so they complained and they him and hawed, and I got together a meeting with them. And they said, well, nobody knows you're the one stopping it. I said, well, let's have a meeting. Let me tell them I'm the one stopping it. So I got them all together. And I said, I'm not letting this go through until you put in what we all promised to put in through, president wants and everything. They started pointing fingers at each other. And I said, I don't care. You guys figure it out. You put it in until you put it in. It's not moving over. 24 hours later, the bill was exactly the way I wanted it. And we moved it over. That's how you take care of that bureaucracy. Yeah. But also there are, former Secretary Shulkin wanted to cut his own deal, different from the White House. I found out about it through my friends on the Hill. He didn't want access standards. He didn't want veterans to have a choice. He was a holdover from the Obama administration. And so I had to deal with that. And of course, one of the unpleasant things that happened was he was calling the White House every week, demanding that they fire me because he was supposed to be the one doing the deal. And I said, so the reason I didn't get fired was because I was doing what the president wanted. This was never about Darren. It was what my boss wanted, what the president wanted. I'm just the messenger. I'm the guy to make it happen. I'm the foot soldier. So there's great responsibility. There's a great ability to get things done. But it is a tough job. It is 24/7. But there are rewards. You want to go bowling? You can reserve your name in the EOB and reserve it for your friends. The president has his box at the Kennedy Center. You put your name down. Obviously, whoever's president doesn't spend a lot of time in the Kennedy Center presidential box, but your name comes up and you go there, and first thing you learn is here's the code to the refrigerator, and you can eat all the president's food in his box. So there are some of these perks. It's one of those things where at first you're in awe, but it's a job. You go there every day, you go through security, so you're kind of in awe still, but it's also just becomes a regular situation. And then when you get to meet the president, like I did, and talk about the Mission Act and what he wanted, it's kind of surreal. You go through that process. I even have a picture of it because the president asked me to go behind his desk and take a picture with him and have the Secret Service do it. So I keep that picture because I would never ask the president for a picture. He's, right. He's the boss. He's not, this is not Celebrity Apprentice. So these are the things that you remember. it's a great job. It's a great opportunity. I would, if you ever have the opportunity to do it, you should do it. Just be prepared for a 24/7 high stress environment, which is why most people don't stay there 4 years or 8 years, because you do burn out.
Yeah.
You do burn out.
Yeah, I've heard that from many friends of mine or others that I've known who've worked in the White House, some in the Trump administration, and just say, it is just all encompassing. You just have major burnout when you're done. But they all seem to have enjoyed the time that they got to do there. Any without, obviously, I know you'll be loyal to the president here, but any interesting stories about President Trump you'd like to tell us?
Well, let me just say this, because obviously the conversations are confidential.
Sure.
Are confidential. It's when I met with the president, I didn't know what to expect, because it was my first meeting with the president. And you see all the news stories and the campaign speeches. So what I have to say is there's two Trumps. There's the campaign Trump, and then there's the presidential Trump. And when you meet the president, he's just basically a CEO, a nice guy CEO. First thing he did a couple of things. He asked about my family, talked about how he knew people in the San Diego area where I live, how it was so nice to meet me, all the great things he heard about me. Kind of like talking to Jeff right here.
Right.
And then he said, look, I just want to honestly hear what's going on. I just want you to tell me what's really going on, an honest answer. So it's just between me and you. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Just tell me what you honestly think. And we just went through, and he just really knows his subject really well. So it was a really pleasant experience. I'm sure if you don't know your job, it's not a pleasant experience. But just think about any top-notch CEO. How are they going to treat you? How are they going to, what kind of questions they ask? That's the Trump that we knew in the White House.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I've heard that from many people, very business-like, but friendly and warm and nice to employees and staff and others. Let's talk about getting the Mission Act passed. I mean, what's the biggest challenge that you faced in getting the Mission Act passed?
Well, the biggest challenge was twofold. One, I had a VA secretary who wanted his version, not the White House or the president. So we had to overcome that. Number two, because of that, there was a lot of misinformation, as there is today, even about what access standards. And I would point out that the access standards were simply borrowed from DOD, and DOD had already had them for 20 years, and they worked fine. So if every veteran had gone through DOD and lived under the access standards, why wouldn't these same veterans be able to have the same choices that they do at DOD and TRICARE Prime? We had some veterans organizations that were not their leadership, but their staff, which were bought into the political scene and like to go to cocktail parties, and bought into the old VA system and didn't want to change it, didn't want to do what was best for their own veterans. And then we had the Democrats like Bernie Sanders and others who also cared about socialized healthcare and not what veterans really happened, and left-wing groups that would put out fake news and it's going to privatize everything. And one of the most Orwellian statements that to this day exists, you have to not have choice to have choice, and now it's you have to end choice to have choice. And so the Orwellian statement is, look, if you give veterans choice, they may not want to use the VA, and therefore if they don't want to use the VA, you'll close down the VA, and therefore you won't have choice of the VA, therefore you can't have choice to save choice, because the only choice you really should have is the VA.
Gosh.
Really circular, bizarre Orwellian logic. And the real thing is, look, I've been at this for over 23 years. It's amazing. 9 years in the VA, 2 administrations. We've given the VA every opportunity to fix itself. But the only way veterans don't get harmed, the only way VA has an opportunity to really fix itself is competition, is choice. Because whether it's the private sector where I worked in or the VA, a monopoly, which just gets fed, does not have any incentive to fix itself, to provide good customer service, to provide good health care.
Yeah.
Only if the dollar follows the veteran, only when the veteran can go. This was the private sector. In the private sector, we would fix things up. We would make sure things were good because we knew we would lose them to somebody else. And if we lost our patients, we would have to shut down. VA doesn't face that. No matter how, and look, they just announced, despite a 10% increase in the 2025 budget, they just announced that they're $12 billion short for 2025. How can you be? You haven't even started the year yet.
Right.
There's no incentive. They just waste, spend the most inefficient healthcare, and it's the most uncaring healthcare. in the country. And so they're losing doctors. And so, those were the forces. And look, in our first SFAC vote, we lost like 16-1. And so we had to do a lot of education. We had a lot of, going around the hill, a lot of teaming up. CVA, I wasn't at CVA, obviously, but they were a big part of that education and the grassroots and whatnot, and veterans, and to turn things around so where we eventually won 92-5. That comes through a lot of hard work. That comes through a lot of hard negotiations. It wasn't a perfect bill, but we got what we wanted with the access standards. We got things like the Air Commission, Center for Innovation, caregivers was in there that Senator Tester wanted. And we had some, small ball things as, because different legislators, you got to do this negotiation. I ended up by accident being the negotiator for the White House. Policy people do not normally become the negotiators, but nobody else wanted it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. This is what you do in the military. It may not be your job, but if someone else is there to do it, you do it. I did it. It was probably my best asset was that I didn't know how to negotiate because I was a wild card. And when I said the White House wasn't going to do it unless you had access standards and choice, Tester backed off because they're like, this guy, who knows what he's going to do? He doesn't know what he's doing. So I just knew what the president wanted, and I had full reign to do what I need to do. And that's how we got it done. And then we just told the VSOs, hey, this is what your members want. This is what, CVA had surveys, 90%, close to 90% of veterans want the choice. They may or may not use it, but they want the choice. And so it was a hard fought, fake news stories about me coming out all the time. People Google me now and they're like, wow, what the heck was going on? Like, hey, change is hard. And the administrative state doesn't want to change. So if you're a reformist, you're going to get the shots thrown at you. You just have to understand that.
Right. So you got it passed. Talk about what was it like the day that it was signed into law? That must have been a surreal feeling for you.
Yeah, it was. Everyone who was opposed to it was for it now, and they all claimed credit for it.
Yeah,
every VSO, every senator. President was not happy with Tester and the way he negotiated and the things that he did to oppose it, so he did not invite him. But lots of senators had nice second row seats. A lot of congratulations. The VA. Secretary Shulkin, who had opposed it, had been fired. So he was not there. So we had an interim secretary at that point. But it was very salutatory, lots of great promise. And it was just a great day, great events. Everyone's getting their photo taken with the president, signing it and getting the pins. And, I just got to talk to a lot of folks and just see the results of all that work. It was a great day, and it was under the Trump administration. Great things happened with it. Right.
Now, I'm sure at that point you realized, well, we signed the bill into law, but now it's got to be implemented. And you were in a unique position because after you left the White House, you then went over to the other side to help implement the Mission Act. Now, how helpful was it to be able to go and implement that? That isn't always the case.
Yeah, it was something I did not expect to do. My wife actually just wanted me to come home, and because I actually live in California, so it's kind of a commute, kind of visiting the wife. But the new Secretary Wilkie, I was on the phone just giving him some friendly advice. As the new secretary, he said, "My chief of staff doesn't know I'm going to ask you this, but is there any way, shape, or form we can get you to come back to the VA because we're having problems implementing? You're the expert. Our people don't seem to understand what to do. We're not making any progress, and we're going to run out of time because we had a 1-year deadline to get everything done, or literally the healthcare system would fall apart." I'm like, well, let me talk about it. I really didn't want to go back, but I didn't want it to fail either. So I said, okay, came back as his senior advisor. I came back under one condition. I said, I'll come back, one condition. He said, what's the one condition? I said, I need to have full authority to do whatever I need to do to get this thing implemented. Everyone was skeptical. VA had failed in every initiative. They didn't think my friends on the Hill said, VA's screwing up. They're not going to get it done. So I came back, did an assessment, found out what the problems were, And I had full authority from the secretary to do whatever I want, whatever Darren wants, you just do it. And that's what I needed, and that's what I got, and that's how I was able to force the changes. I try to be nice to everybody, but if you're not getting it done, we had a deadline June 6th. I said, that is your D-Day. June 6th is D-Day. It is your D-Day for veterans. There is no, but Darren, we can't get it done in 9 months. We can't get it done in a year. We can't get a new IT system up in 6 months. I said, wrong answer. We are going to get it done. Now tell me what we need to do to get it done. Don't tell me you can't get it done.
Right.
It was back into it. Basically, the old military training kicked in. You would never go to your squadron commander and say, sir, I can't take that hill. I can't fly that mission. I can't get it done. You get your boot on your butt real quickly. What you do is you come back and say, this is what I need to get it done.
Right.
And that's what we did in total change of philosophy. The bureaucrats are not used to that. They're used to extensions and excuses. So no, this has to be done. And you did a scorecard. We did all the management principles. And I put in a new governance, all this stuff. Some people were politely in positions. They would tell me they don't know why they were in. I said, you're the wrong, you don't have the expertise. I know I don't have the expertise, Jared, but they put me in there. Okay, well, we're going to move you off the side and put in who does have the expertise. So a lot of people were upset at first because they wanted to be green and, have nice presentations in front of the secretary. It's like, no, we're going to be real. You're going to be red. You're going to be yellow. You get to green when we're done. We got the White House involvement to make sure we had the resources. Get all hands on deck, and we got it done. No one thought we could get it done, but we got it done. And every week I'd meet with the chief of staff. Every month I'd meet the secretary, and I had full access to everybody. Everyone came on board, and we got it done. I don't think VA has been able to do anything like that since then. They've been failing at the electronic health records. They've been not following the Mission Act. But it's all about leadership. Yeah, it's all about leadership and being organized.
Yeah. Well, and you saw the Mission Act really help veterans, but you see that now, of course, the VA, particularly under the Biden administration, the VA trying to keep veterans in the VA system and making it difficult to allow them to, or to, under the law, under the Mission Act, they should be able to access community care if that's what they choose. Talk about some of the things that you've seen. I mean, they were supposed to set up a website, they set it up, and now that points right back to VA care. I mean, they are really putting a lot of obstacles in front of veterans and the implementation of the Mission Act now.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I had never seen this. Now, look, I had 9 years in the agency. I'd seen bureaucrats or other administrations who didn't like stuff try to, go around the law a little bit or sidestep it a little bit. We knew those things could happen, but I had never seen anybody actually defy the law. You just don't defy the law. Mm-hmm. You follow the law. You don't defy it.
Right.
We started, I came back to the CVA after I was done in the Trump administration, and we started getting reports in 2021 under a new administration of things changing. They're not following the law. Eventually, we had enough reports that we talked to AFP Foundation, our sister organization. Yep. They did a FOIA request, and look, because I helped write the regulations and the training and had been, sleeves up and was totally involved in all of the implementation. When VA did a dump of 1,600 pages, I was able to go through and start finding in the training materials where they were just not following the law, where they were not, following the access standards by date of request, how they were playing it. We eventually wrote, let's see, I got a copy over here. We eventually have it's called Delayed and Denied Care. Wrote a summary, but we identified where VA was literally not following the law, where they weren't telling veterans they were eligible. They were gaming wait times by giving you a date before the wait time expired, and then the day before calling up and canceling your appointment. They were not following date of request. They were using performance measures not to use community care. So we put this information out, and I was astounded. And it was hurting veterans. Veterans were not being able to get care. So they were doing that. And then they took it one step further. They did a red team report last January that was released last March, where they absolutely said, despite all of our previous efforts, veterans are still going to the community at an increase of 15 to 20%. One of the reasons that was happening was because central office says stuff, but a lot of medical centers just continue to do their own thing. So some medical centers were, not following the Mission Act or partially following it, or staff was doing it. That was not good enough. So they put out a red team report, which was secret, which was then got leaked, which came out. But in that red team report, they did some things which were just astounding. One, they said, we're better than the community. Veterans just don't know it. That's why they're going to the community. Two, we're going to force them to go back to the VA. We're going to repatriate them. Now, repatriation is not a healthcare term.
Yeah.
It's a prisoner of war term.
Right.
We're going to force them back in the system. And we're also going to incentivize them. We'll actually pay them to use the system. We're better than everybody else. All community care providers are basically evil. They're all just trying to make a buck. They're trying to do unnecessary tests. And we're going to go ahead and cut emergency care. We're going to cut mental health. We're going to cut oncology. They talked about how they're going to mitigate, cut. To what end? You're not going to get cardiology because if you have the longer wait times at the VA, a lot of veterans are going there because 5 months, 6 months. I talk to staff all the time. So all you're going to do is make veterans wait 5, 6, 7, 8 months, not get the care. Stage 1 cancer becomes stage 4 cancer, heart attacks. Veterans are already, who have other health insurance, getting the majority, 62% of their care and others. So it became outright defiance. And then they put in a new policy that said, you're going to do this. They sent a memo to their vision directors saying that your performance review is dependent upon you decreasing community care and increasing community care. And then I have staff where vision directors are literally saying, our goal is zero community care. The Undersecretary of Health did a video last March, a virtual town hall saying, you will cut community care, and community care is going to be the very last option. And so it's very Orwellian. We've seen the documents. We've seen how they do this. And even though the law says that you are eligible, even though the veteran says they want it, they literally put together these teams that know nothing about the veterans, the medical workers, and overturn their own doctors, overturn the law, overturn the regulation, and deny veterans community care. We talked to an association, a behavioral health association, whose members are up in arms because all of a sudden, after this red team report, they have a 60 to 70% decrease in community care.
Wow.
And that's not because suddenly the VA has this capacity.
Right.
Staff are quitting. They're calling me up and they're saying I had to quit because I couldn't take it anymore because they're making it almost impossible to get community care. And veterans are out there waiting. Some are committing suicide, aren't getting care. I mentioned what happened in Phoenix. And I even have a friend in Oceanside who was seeing a mental health provider in the community for 2 years, outpatient. A month and a half ago, they said, you're done. No more community care. We have a new policy. No more community. She said, what about my continuity of care? What about, I'll be getting better. We don't care. New policy. You'll have to see an internal person. Okay. How long of a wait? 5 months. 5 months? What am I supposed to do for 5 months? Oh, go do group therapy. But this is like private stuff between me and my clinician. Right. I don't really want to share this. Don't care. Then you get nothing for 5 months. So I literally went to the mental health clinic myself with her. And the first thing I noticed was, where is everybody? There's no staff walking around. There's no patients walking around. There's a 5 month wait. There's only one patient in the mental health clinic. We were there for 2 hours, one patient. That patient left. One more patient came in over 2. You have a 5 month wait and there's like no patients. What the heck's going on? I had to go talk to the mental health clinician. I had to go explain that the veterans by law have the right to eligibility determination, that they have the right to community care through access standards. You know what the clinician said to me?
So,
no one's ever told me about access standards. I don't know what they are. Can
wow.
you tell me what they are? The bottom line is, because I personally went there, was a former VA employee, nicely hit him over the head with the law and the regulation and stuff like that. 3 days later, they gave her community care back.
Wow.
But that can't happen very often.
Right. Right. Yeah. You
That's
can't,
how
you
that's how
can't go
bad.
do that for every veteran, right? That's the problem. So kind of the last question here is, there's a bill sponsored by Senator Marsha Blackburn to help with this issue. And it's the follow on. The problem is you still have to ask permission from the VA, right? That's essentially the problem here. Tell us what Marsha Blackburn's bill does.
Well, I provided technical assistance on it. It's a very simple bill. It basically just normalizes the whole managed care process to whatever else in the world. I mean, even if you're on Medicaid, most states have where you can pick from a network your own doctors and stuff like that. You have the same managed care process, but it basically is the legislative version of Commission Care Recommendation Number 1. Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act would do what we already can do in the VA with urgent care. With urgent care, you go to any provider in the network, you just go. You don't ask permission, and so we don't have problems with urgent care. So this would do the same sort of thing. You pick the primary care doctor you want, VA or the in the provider network. You have just one network, and VA's in that network, and your primary care, your specialty, you at all times pick. It's always your choice. Just like you go to HealthNet, you go to Humana, you don't have networks, and you pick the doctor in your network. You pick the hospital in your network. You pick the specialist. So you go through the same process. Primary care. Whether it's primary care, VA, or primary care, they follow the same process all managed care organizations do. And so you don't have these problems anymore. You don't have any access standards because at all times you pick your primary care, you pick your specialist, you pick whether you want VA or the provider. VA would not have the ability to stop you just like they can do with urgent care. And then VA itself would probably fix itself up pretty quickly because if it didn't, the veterans would all go to the private sector and then they would start losing their money. So they're going to start providing better care, they're going to provide better wait times, or they're going to lose the veteran. And that's the only way, after 23 years of work in this, 9 years in the institution, the only thing that's going to fix the VA is competition, is with the dollar follows the veteran. And the only way to make sure veterans don't get hurt is that they can pick. And people say to me all the times in radio shows and podcasts, well, good VA, bad VA, good private sector, bad. I said, what's the difference there? The difference is if I don't like Kaiser, I go to a different plan. If I don't like my doctor in my healthcare plan, I can go somewhere else. My wife had to do that once, but she had the ability to do that. That's the difference. If they provide poor customer service, if the doctor's not available, I can go somewhere else or they'll get another doctor. Even DOD does most of this these days. But with the VA, you can't. You're trapped. No veteran should be trapped. That's the choice is the difference. Competition is the difference. And with choice and competition, if you have a bad provider, whether it's the VA or the private sector, you can pick the provider that works best for you. You can pick the Mayo Clinic. You can pick the Cleveland Clinic. You can pick what's in the network. And if your network's not a good network, you can pick a different healthcare plan that has, you can do this in FAHB. You can do this in Medicare. You can do this in DOD. You just can't do it in the VA. But we want the veterans in the VA to have the same opportunity for choice that everyone else in this country has.
Yeah. Well, Darren, I mean, thank you for all the great work you've done. I mean, veterans around the country owe you, frankly, a debt of gratitude. We owe them, of course, the care that we've promised them, and we owe them our thanks for their service to our country. But I'll tell you what, you've done just incredible work to help veterans get the health care that they deserve. And you're right, it is about choice. But I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for all the hard work you've put in for the millions of veterans out there.
Well, thank you for having me on and talking about this. Is more people just need to understand what that's really going on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, listen, this is a great example. We've talked about this so many times, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, private sector healthcare, or whether it's VA healthcare. If you provide choice and competition, that's what will change the system. Darren talked about the Phoenix VA system and, a veteran literally having a heart attack 3 feet out the door and they wouldn't help him. What private sector health care company would do that? Nobody, because they know that they'd be out of business if that got out. But that doesn't happen at the VA because they need to be held accountable for those sorts of things. We need choice and competition to help our veterans. And we need to pass this bill that Senator Marsha Blackburn has introduced, and that will make a great bit of difference as well. We're getting there. We're getting there because of the great work of Concerned Veterans for America, Darin Selnick, President Trump, who signed and pushed for the Missions Act. He deserves a lot of credit for that as well. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us on American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.